Every year, millions of illegal immigrants begin their journey into the United States hoping for a better life. The southern border is under extreme pressure as the Biden administration crumbles under the surge, a key political weapon used throughout history and more so in recent years.
We're going to build the wall. We have no choice. We have no choice. Build that wall. Build that wall. So we're going to build it.
What I would do as president is several more things, because things have changed. I would, in fact, make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. They deserve to be heard. That's who we are. We're a nation that says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come. I would change the order that the president just changed, saying women who were being beaten and abused could no longer claim that as a reason for asylum.
Donald Trump's wall sits barely built along the southern border, with another key Trump policy, Title 42, set to expire in May. This comes at a time that US border authorities are facing extreme influxes of migrants. US border agent sources told Fox News that 1.2 million illegal migrants got away from authorities while crossing the border under President Biden's administration. Monthly border encounters rose from 101,000 in February 2021 to 251,000 in December 2022. And CNN have reported 2.3 million southern border encounters under the Biden administration.
It's all tied to the policies of the current administration. When the Biden administration came into office, they had a program that was initiated under former President Trump called Remain in Mexico, which allowed for an orderly process to those that were claiming asylum. They needed to stay in Mexico until their claims were reviewed and approved. When the Biden administration came in, they decided that they were going to fight Remain in Mexico and not endorse it or enforce it. They also did the same with Title 42, which is a Centers for Disease Control program that was initiated during the pandemic, and they were not enforcing that in its entirety either. So what happened was we had this perception that was created globally that our borders were wide open. And as a result, we started to see the significant surge in migrants making the dangerous journey to the United States.
So when you were working for the DHS, how different does the border look now?
Well, it looks a lot different. And I was working at the Department of Homeland Security as a senior law enforcement advisor for the Secretary of Homeland Security in a Democrat administration under President Obama. And what we did was the asylum laws were enforced, the border and immigration laws were enforced, and what we decided to focus the resources on were those that were in the country illegally. If they were committing crimes, they were immediately removed. So that kept some semblance of order on our southwest border and some form of deterrence to prevent migrants from wanting to make the dangerous journey. As a result, we were deporting over 450,000 migrants a year that were either sneaking in illegally and committing crimes while in the U.S.
Well, the border saw a record 2.3 million encounters in the 2022 fiscal year. Do you think it's because of this messaging, or because there is a Democratic president? I mean, I wonder what it would happen if the Republican president did come into power in 2024.
Yeah, no, I think it's a combination of the policy and the messaging. So long as your policy exists in ways that, like, the Biden is trying to crack down on migration now because these numbers are incredible. I mean, we're seeing records for January. We saw a record for December. And he knows that Title 42 is set to expire in May. And so he's trying to preemptively deal with it. But his policies, because he gets hit from the left so hard, his policies still have these administrative sort of bureaucratic avenues for many, many people to just get into the United States. That doesn't mean that they're going to be given amnesty immediately. illegally. But it does mean that they're going to be able to cross. And once you're able to cross, because there are sanctuary cities in the United States, because there are ways to evade detection and punishment for having crossed illegally, one of his policies that he just rolled out is you don't get asylum. You're immediately disqualified if you cross the border illegally. Well, there are also tons of exemptions to that. And so as long as you have both the messaging and the policy that we are not cracking down on this, and that we are on the policy level, there are all of these exemptions. People are going to get in, and they're going to keep coming because of that. Their friends, their relatives, they're going to keep coming because they know other people got it. So it's a combination of both for sure.
Emily Jashinsky from The Federalist has seen firsthand the situation unfolding along the border.
The truth is, they'd rather sleep on the street or in overcrowded migrant shelters, scrounging cash and food, paying smugglers, than miss out on the opportunity to get into America and to stay.
We're looking for something very special for living. We got a dream.
Okay.
The dream for arrive over there.
The American dream.
Yeah, it's a dream for all Asian people.
On the front line, what does the border look like? What did you see?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was last there in June when Title 42, it was still kind of hung up in the courts. There was this idea that Title 42 was going to be gone. People had to get to the border as quickly as they could. And that what you ended up seeing were a lot of people camping in the streets in these border towns in Mexico, waiting just for a chance to get across the other side of the river. They had all paid cartels. It's the one thing that you talk to every single migrant who's hoping to cross the border into Texas, Arizona, or California. They will all tell you they paid a cartel at some point in their journey to make the trip. A lot of them were paying for protection on the streets of Mexico, Reynosa, other parts of northern Mexico. They're paying for protection on a nightly basis just to be able to sleep in the streets or to exist in that city. And everyone knows that if you spend enough time, you are able to hire a lawyer, or at some point the court does something, whether it's with Title 42, humanitarian parole, or any other aspect of America's sort of vast immigration policy through the federal bureaucracy. At some point, there's a very good chance you'll get in. And so the alternative of either staying in your home country or in another country you migrated to before trying to get into America, as is the case with many Haitians, the alternative is much worse from their perspective than sleeping on those streets and just hoping for a chance to get into the United States, because that chance they feel is so strong.
Do you think because of that severity of the issue, all congregating together and then they're waiting on these court dates if they do come about, do you think the estimation of how many gotaways in the United States is a lot more?
That's a really good question. My instinct is to say absolutely, that we have a really hard time grasping the scope of this because, you are also paying, in some cases, the cartels to take you across the border. Now, one way that especially people like Joe Biden, proponents of immigration, would argue, they would say because they have made the legal pathways to seek asylum and to seeking things like humanitarian parole so easy, that we generally know how many people are coming in. But there are still cases where people feel they have to pay the cartel to ferry them over the Rio Grande or another part of the border illegally. I talked to one migrant from Cuba. He had paid $11,000, he said, to go from Cuba into Central America, make his way up. He crossed the border thinking that Cubans were exempt from Title 42. Well, that had changed the day before. He eventually crossed the border again, this time illegally. And I doubt he has been on the radar of the American government at all. So it's really hard to say, but the likelihood that we are underestimating the scope of what's happening illegally with gotaways, I think is very, very high. At the same time, though, we are also tracking more and more. Our numbers are reflecting more and more because the Biden administration has made it so easy to make claims of asylum that have, very little bearing legally. But then people are allowed to come into the country, go to a sanctuary city, and basically stay.
I want to compare the pair between Trump and Biden, because not just from your reporting, but other reporting I've seen, there has been, grabs of illegal immigrants saying that it is easier to come to the United States under the Biden administration. Do you think that it's quite a well-known notion with illegal immigrants that it is easier now?
Yeah, no, that is such a good question. Yes, because as long as the Biden administration gives people humanitarian parole or lets them into our country, doesn't enforce what's called wait in Mexico or other policies, that's part of the problem here is we have these like tangled bureaucratic policies that sometimes conflict with each other, sometimes are enforced and sometimes aren't. But as long as people are getting in, what happens is they get on WhatsApp, they get on Facebook, they get on the phone and tell people who are in Nicaragua, who are in Mexico, who are in Honduras or Venezuela, that they got in. And so long as that is being communicated in large numbers, that's going to be all people need, desperate people need. That's the scrap of hope they need to make the trip. And on top of that, cartels do spread disinformation. It doesn't help when their disinformation is fueled by the reality that a whole lot of people are actually getting in, but they spread that through WhatsApp channels, they spread that through the internet, they spread that through Facebook, whatever it is. And so one person who runs a shelter, a pastor who runs a shelter, told us in Matamoros, Mexico on the border, he said, we talk every day or every month regularly with people in the US side and just beg them to send out a message in plain Spanish. That's what he said, in plain Spanish, telling people that if they come, they're not going to get in. And they never do it, he said. He doesn't know why, but he said for years they've been asking for that to be communicated, and it just never is. And that is one of the things that just gives migrants the impression that, you know, they'll be able to, especially under a Democratic president, somebody who doesn't talk about the policy of illegal immigration the way Donald Trump does. That's what fuels this impression that if you come up to the border some way, somehow, at some point, you will get in, because it tends to be true in most cases for most migrants eventually.